I'm having a little mic trouble tonight. I'm sorry about that. We're going to get started with our workshop for tonight. Our workshop is weatherizing for energy savings. Our instructor is Lee Taylor. Lee is also joined by his wife, who is on the camera, and I'm having lots of trouble with my mic.
It's working all right. Thanks, Jason. And yeah, like Jason said, if you have questions, please put them in there. It's always nice to kind of get a feel for what people are wanting to know. And if you're watching this after the fact, you can still put in questions. It just may take us a minute to be able to answer them. So, in this workshop, we're going to be talking about weatherizing, and really just the kind of some of the simple things you can do to be able to help you save that energy. And energy costs are going to be going up this winter, and they're saying they might even go up even worse next winter. So there's a lot of little things you can do that will hopefully be able to make it so that your energy bill, is not going up quite as much. The thing you have to remember too with a lot of the energy savings that I'm talking about is if you're kind of going by last year's bills, and let's say energy prices go up 15, 20, 30%, whatever it's going to be, the steps that you take may not necessarily show a savings necessarily. It may be more of a you're breaking even or you're closer to what you were the year before, even though those energy costs have gone up. So keep that in mind. What we're going to be talking about is caulking windows, different ways to be able to do that. We'll talk about the shrink wrap, storm windows. We'll talk about weather stripping throughout your home, exterior doors and door sweeps and all that good stuff. We'll talk about how to deal with large gaps and cracks and stuff, and how to best seal those, and what products work best. We'll be talking about if you have a basement, how to, or even a crawl space, how to deal with air moving through those rim joist areas, that sort of thing. We'll talk about installing, putting in insulation in your attic and all that sort of stuff. We'll talk about touch on the mechanical systems in your home. A lot of this is covered in other classes. We'll talk about some of the other safety aspects as far as like carbon monoxide detectors, smoke detectors, that sort of thing. And then, how to, a lot of people also think, they're always thinking about ways they can save energy, but also, you want to think about how you can save on your water bill and things like that. So we'll be talking about low flow shower heads and aerators and stuff like that. And then how to deal with like insulating your water heater if need be. So weatherization, basically is just making your house more energy efficient. A lot of people think it is a complicated thing, and it's not. It really isn't. It depends on how far you go. I don't think you can necessarily air seal your house. And I say air sealing, and what I'm talking about with that, the bulk of the energy savings, or the bulk of the, I guess, things that you're going to be doing are to stop air movement. And that's something to keep in mind, is that, if that air can move through that wall or through a gap or a crack, you're gonna feel that. And that's really that comfort issue that people talk about. I'm cold or whatever. The other is that different products do different things. So we'll be getting into those also. So we'll start with your windows. So with windows, I've said this before in other classes. The basics on that. If you're not using them, lock them. They all have, most windows, I say most modern windows have weather seal and weather strip built into them, and it helps keep those windows tight, and they're not gapping and letting a bunch of air move in and out without you wanting it to. So by keeping those windows shut and locked, it's going to make that window more energy efficient. It's also going to make it so that window is not fighting you come summer. If you have storms, like this is one of the storms, simply just going through and making sure that you have the glass is in good shape. This one just has a screen, so it's kind of defeating the purpose. So if you have screens put in for the summer, pop those screens out and put in your panes of glass and have those in. Another odd thing, especially on your south-facing windows, is clean those windows, come fall or whatever. I'm talking about solar gain. So that sun gets lower in the sky, you're going to get much more, sun going through those windows, and it's going to give you a certain amount of what's called solar gain. So those windows being clean, at least on the south side of the house, help with that. The other thing you can do is, I said you can, we're on the outside here, so maybe spin around here. So this is the outside of your storm window. So you go through either, changing them out, getting the glass in, make sure all that's good. What you may want to do also is caulk where it meets the windowsill, so where that meets in there. Sometimes there's gaps because most of the time these don't get taken out. So you can get air that will move through and then in. So sometimes you want to caulk with a good exterior caulk around the storm window itself. Other things you can do with windows on the inside, there's things like this. This is just a type that you cut it down, you put it on the trim, you use a double stick tape, clean it with rubbing alcohol or something so it actually sticks. It's a film, and then you run your heat hair dryer or something along that line, and it shrinks down, and it's a nice clear thing. So it is a little bit annoying if you have blinds or something along that line. If you're cutting a hole in it to run that rod through, you're kind of diminishing or kind of defeating the purpose of it. So you have to be a little choosy on what you use as far as these shrink film styles. The other is this guy right here. So they have a class, Interior Storms, where they teach how to make something like this. So it's similar to what we were just talking about with that shrink wrap. It's actually that same style shrink wrap. It's got a foam edge. You got your window here, and you can actually put these in. They got that foam gasket, and you can fit them right into the window nice and snug, and it just adds that another layer. If you don't have something like this, and you still, if you don't really want to go that route, what you can do is you can, like I said, making sure it's locked wherever the two panes meet. So this area up here, where it meets the edge, the bottom down here, this sort of thing, right? This is where the air is going to be moving through. You can do things like peel and stick caulk. So you clean it, and then it's a clear caulk, and you put it on there, and it makes it so you can peel that off. The only issue I have about that, and this is a question I don't know, maybe somebody out there does. It worries me a little bit that if somebody does something like that, can they open that window? They need to get out. So details like that. So you can do something along that line. Again, your panes of glass should be in good shape, glazed, and all that stuff from the outside. That's one of those things you can do in the fall while it's still a little bit warm. You can also insulate around. Sorry. You can insulate around the windows. You've all seen the expanding foam out there. They have one that's for windows and doors. That's important if you're going to be doing something like that. This requires like popping the trim off on the inside, then going that gap between the window frame and the framing. Window like this wouldn't work though. You know, if you have these old style windows that have the weights inside, yeah, definitely don't want to be locking those things up. You can see right here, they have the ropes and this sort of thing that makes it so they have a pulley and this rope goes in and it's got a weight for a counterweight for the sash to open up. You definitely don't want to lock those up. So you have to, it kind of depends on what style window you have. Doors, you know, exterior doors, if you have, you know, something like this, slam that shut. Let's say this is the framing to your house and you got a gap like this. You know, a lot of times, you know, you can put your hand near it. You'd have trim on the inside, that sort of thing. A lot of times you can put your hand right by it and you'll feel that air moving through. Some people use like an incense stick or something and they could see that air moving through. Sometimes when you pop off, and let's say you really want to get into it, you pop off that interior trim, you may notice that there's either nothing in there, or somebody got like fiberglass insulation and jammed it in there. The insulation, the fiberglass insulation, doesn't stop airflow. It adds R value. R value, the higher the R value, the more resistance to heat as far as it moving through, the longer it takes. So, you know, if it's a fiberglass insulation put in there, it really does nothing to stop that airflow. And we were talking about that earlier as far as airflow being the biggest culprit. So something like this works out. And the reason you want to use window and door is that if you use another product that this company sells, you know, for big gaps and cracks, that's for other stuff. But what can happen is if you use the wrong stuff that's not made for windows and doors, it can actually bow your frame here and push it in and make it so your door doesn't want to open or your window doesn't want to open, stuff like that. So if you're going to be doing something along those lines, you know, make sure you use that right product. And you can talk to the people at the store and stuff, and they can help you with that. On the outside, what some people will do is they'll caulk. So this is the outside of the door. You have your siding. Usually your siding is running up here. If you have vinyl siding, it doesn't really work. But if you have wood siding or something along that line where that wood butts up, and you'll see that gap between the siding and then whatever, brick mold or window frame or something like that, you can get in there with a good quality caulk and seal that up. Biggest thing about those caulks is that they're all different types. You know, you have, it's just tons. This is that peon steel that I was talking about earlier. But you have to think about, you know, is it made for interior, exterior, or both? One of the things you have to look at. Am I going to be painting it later? Do I want to paint it later? You know, pure silicone doesn't usually accept paint. So sometimes you have to kind of look at that sort of thing and really understand what you're going to be using it for. And I'm going to be talking about different ways of using caulk throughout this class. And the key thing to remember is don't buy your cheapest caulk that you can find, because it will dry out and crack and really just not do what it's meant to do anymore. So, you know, if you go there and you say, oh, there's like a painter's caulk and it's only, you know, it's much less than the other caulks, I'm going to get that. Well, it just means you're going to be out there probably the following year redoing exactly what you did because it shrunk up, it got dry and brittle and cracked. It causes other issues. So, like I said, look into what kind of caulk you want to do. Do you want to paint it? You know, is it outside? You know, you want it to stay flexible. You know, a lot of times they're going to say how long they're good for, you know, 20 year, 35 year, 40 years, something along that line. So, you know, kind of pay attention to that when you're getting some of these caulks. You can do the same thing with windows, you know, where they're on the outside, you know, that trim around the window. And again, you're stopping that airflow from moving through and into the home. So, you know, caulking and sealing and stuff like that really can help quite a bit. We talk about this in other classes also. Here's some pictures, you know, them putting up This is the shrink wrap stuff, making sure they're locked up. So, it's showing all these little different things that you can do. And windows can be a pretty good area as far as losing heat. The other is weather stripping. So when I talk about weather stripping, I'm talking about the weather stripping you'd have usually on your exterior door. Yes, the windows have them also, but I'm not really getting into that too much. I'm talking about, this is a more modern style door. So this weather stripping, not going to step up there. That'll be bad. This weather stripping actually pulls out. So if this gets damaged, usually gets damaged on this strike side, what you can do is you can pull this weather stripping out. And it has this little finned area right here. And that's the part that the door sits up against. You see this little rabbit cut out here. And you can pull this out and go to the store and buy. There are varying grades of it. A lot of times they've gotten pretty good at saying, good, better, best. The different boxes you pay a little bit more, but it's less likely to tear. It compresses a little bit easier. It seals up a little bit easier. So replacing that weather stripping on your door, you have your strike side, your top, and then your hinge side. There are some out there that have magnets built into them, like for a steel door. It just depends. Like I said, there's a lot of different styles out there, colors, all that sort of stuff. When you go to put it in, what you're going to do, and I'm not going to do it because I don't want to stand on this, start at the top, and you're going to insert it in. And what you want to do is have that door open. And as you're putting it in, you're grabbing it like this and just squishing it in there. And I say start from the top because what happens is as you're putting this in, it's going to stretch. So you're going to be moving along like this. And then what I want to do is when I get down here to the threshold, you see how I don't really want to force it in there. So I may need to get a scissor and take a little snip off of that and put it in. All right. And sometimes that last bit can be a little bit of a grouch to get in. So that's the weather stripping around the door. There's another part to this. So let's say your weather stripping is in good shape. You close your door, you don't see any daylight, you don't feel any air moving around the whole perimeter of that where that weather stripping is. But if you look at it on the bottom, on this corner and on the hinge corner, on these bottoms right above the threshold here, a lot of times you're going to see a little bit of daylight shining through. And that's where these come in. They sell these as little stick-em pads. You got a little sticky pad on the back. I clean this area off. You notice how this side's a little thicker than this. This side is meant to go under that weather stripping. So when that weather stripping comes back, it actually flares. Say I stuck that on. It actually flares that weather stripping out a little bit. And that just it's kind of hard to see on camera, but it makes it so that you don't have those little gaps on either side, on your inside and your strike side. So that's part of the weather stripping on the frame. As far as the weather stripping on the door itself, you have, I'm coming back, sorry. You have, again, this is a modern style door. You have this. If you were to feel underneath this door, you have two little rabbits cut out. And you usually know when these start wearing out because you open your door and you have one of these dragging behind and stuff. So what you can do is usually sits just right in here like this. You push it up just like that. A lot of times you can just get a screwdriver, flat blade, get in there, gently pry it down, pry it off. You notice on this, they have a little bit of glue on the end here and a little bit of glue on the end down here. You buy them in whatever width your door is. Pry that old one off, get rid of it. You can, I'd kind of dry fit it to make sure I don't have to do any trimming. Push this back up. But what I've learned over time is that clean it a little bit with like rubbing alcohol, clean this with rubbing alcohol, put a dab of silicone here and a dab of silicone here. And it just makes it so that when you push it up there, it's going to hold. It's not going to necessarily slip out. Yep, just on the ends, just a little daub. That's all you really need. So if you're doing a caulking job or something like that, got a little left over, great. So that's that undersill here. And then you have the adjustable threshold. And I actually have one up here that I can show you. It's a little easier. It's not crawling around on my knee. So again, this is your threshold. And if you look in here, it has these little caps. You can unscrew this and this whole thing moves up or moves down. So what that does is it makes it so it comes into contact, because sometimes that door is sitting a little bit like this. So what you want to do is close that door and get down on the ground, look, have somebody maybe with a flashlight on the other side, or it's a sunny day or something. And you may see daylight on this side, nothing on this side. So you know you need to raise this side up or down. And it can also adjust down a little bit sometimes, because you ever had a door that's just really hard to open. Sometimes with these style doors, it's just the threshold is pushed up too much. So it's one of those doors you got a body slam to open. So different style thresholds. Other doors have a threshold like this. It's sitting actually like on a piece of oak or something like that. And they have this little rubber part. You can see that it's actually, you can buy a new rubber piece that slips in here if this is damaged. So like I said, there's a lot of different ways. Here's another style sweep. Let's say it's a wooden door or something. This gets screwed on. It's got the little sweep on the bottom. These are oblong holes for the screws so you can move it up or down. So it's just touching that threshold right there type thing. This would be screwed to the bottom of your door. And you have endless types. There's all different types out there. So, you're talking about thresholds. That's a nice way to be able to do that. The really, that's the main thing with the door, and then keeping it shut. A lot of times I know when people, let's say you're going through all that sort of stuff, and it's still, when you shut that door, it just doesn't want to seal up or something. Sometimes, when we talk about this in door class, sometimes that door is sagging. You can look on the top and you can notice how this gap up here is smaller here and bigger on the strike side. It means that door is sagging down like this. So there's another way to be able to adjust that so it actually hits the seals. And sometimes things like that can make a difference. So sometimes there's a slight adjustments you may need to do with the actual door or the window. Some of the doors, pick on these. Some doors need, they don't have that built-in weather stripping. It's a type of weather stripping you need to either nail on. This is one that's a self-stick. You have a sticky side. Different thicknesses, different densities, versus say this one here is really thick. Some are easier to squish than others. So, I said there's a lot of different ways to be able to do that. You can also do this with windows and stuff too. So there's a lot of self-stick styles. You have a style like this where it sits on the frame and you put little nails in, and this is what the door butts up to. So, there's this style here, and they also sell these where they sell them in sticks that are stuck on an aluminum style. So, it's lots of different ways to be able to do it. If you're not really sure what's the best thing to get, and your weather stripping is already wrecked, take a chunk of it and take it to the store and try to match up what works best. So that is one of those things that can really add up. Most people have 2 exterior doors, and you think about all these little gaps and cracks and stuff that you're working on sealing up can easily equate to, say, a window that may be this big that you're just leaving open all winter long, or even bigger sometimes, depending on how old the house is, how drafty it is. So, like I said, every little thing you do can help. Other fun little details. So this is one. So I'm talking about on exterior walls, walls that are butted up to the outside. And this is going to be a little hard to see, but underneath here, let's say this is an outside wall. All right, this is just double plug, but most of them are just single plugs. So what you do is you take off your plate. Best to kill the power first. So I take off that plate, and I've gone through and turned off the power. And what I'm showing you is whatever wall material you have, whether it's drywall or plaster, it doesn't really matter. You have your box that holds your outlets or your switches. This gap between that, what you want to do is get in there with a good caulk and caulk between the outlet box and the drywall or the plaster. Now you ask why. If you ever put your hand in front of an exterior switch or outlet, you'd be amazed how much air is actually moving through there. So that is an area where you get the air coming into that wall cavity, and it wants to figure out a way to get out. So it finds that little gap. So by caulking that around it, and then what you can do is, if it's a switch, you can do things like this, or if it's a outlet, you can do things like this. Double here, so it's a little bit different. But I tuck this in like this, and it seems goofy, but it really does cut down that draft. This one, I'd have to trim it up a little bit and put another one on, and then put your cover back on, and it hides all that, and it helps seal that. So like I said, those switches, outlets, all that sort of stuff on those exterior walls, all can add up as far as that air moving. So it's another small little simple trick that you can do that helps cut down that draftiness that you're going to feel in the house. A lot of times you can get a pack. It's a combination of outlets and switches and stuff like that. So you can buy these. Most of your home centers have something like this. All right. So the other is this. So we don't really have baseboard here, but base trim. So I'm going to pick. We're going to pretend, right? Let's say this is your base trim. It's the ugliest base trim on the planet. But here it is. So you got your wall back here, right? What happens is that, and this depends on what kind of floor you have. You can get air that's going to be moving underneath that base trim and drifting through this way. So if you have means to be able to do it, sometimes people will do like a clear, small bead of clear caulk, something that's not going to necessarily be seen, but it's going to stop that air from moving underneath that base trim. Also, where you have your wall here, the top of the baseboard, because if you get a camera that one of those thermal cameras, and you look at a baseboard, a lot of times what you're going to see is that little cold draft coming up through like this. And you'll see them. They look like little blue fingers, just cold air. So by caulking between your wall and the top of your base trim, and then if you can, the base of your base trim against the floor or something like that, it helps because, like I said, kind of add that up. You go around the whole perimeter of your house, it can be quite a large gap that you seal up. Again, you're working on stopping that air movement or slowing that air movement down. So by caulking, that sort of thing, that helps with your baseboards. Casing, around windows and doors, that sort of thing is kind of the same deal. So, let's say you have your trim around your door. Let's say you went, a whole hog and you said, I'm pulling off my trim and I'm going to seal this up with the window and door foam. Great. And then, or if you don't want to do that, let's say what you can do is just caulk where that base or that casing trim meets your wall and then butts up to the door frame here. And same with windows. So, but again, you'd want to use a caulk that you can paint later on, that sort of thing. So again, thinking about what kind of caulks you're going to be using. Sorry, I'm keeping track of the time, so I don't ramble on. So exterior penetrations, and all that really means is just anything that's, you got a hole drilled through the side of your house, you got, your dryer vent going through, or an electrical line going through, or whatever. Most of the time when they do that, they'll just drill a hole. Usually the hole's way too big, and they'll feed their whatever they're feeding through, right? And they'll leave it. Or maybe it was caulked, 15 years ago, and the caulk's falling apart. So, you want to inspect those. Anywhere you have some kind of a penetration going from the outside to the inside of the house into the basement, or cable lines is another big one. I see, they'll drill big old holes and jam the cable through. You can seal those up. So, you can use different types of caulks for that. There's color match caulks. Let's say it's something through your siding. And you can go to a siding company and say, I have this color siding, and they'll be like, oh yeah, we have one that's close that can match, so you can seal that up, or whatever, or if it's a wood siding, some kind of a caulk that's going to be paintable yet stay flexible and stuff. So any of those penetrations going into the home, and they can add up quite rapidly. Sometimes if you have a larger space, let's say, somebody did drill a hole that was, say, that big for something that was that big. It's not unheard of. And you have this big old gap, and you don't really want to get into the expanding foam. What you can do is you can get different diameters of this foam. And what you do is you tear off what you need, get your putty knife or screwdriver or whatever, and stuff that in, and it acts as a backer. So you can stuff that into the hole, acts as a backer. And again, you can get these all the way up to pretty good size diameter. And it just makes it so you're not using a whole tube of caulk for a small area. So you stuff that in, and then you can caulk around that, clean it up good, be able to paint it later. Or some people just use something like an expanding foam like that, and that's fine too. I will say this about these expanding foams. They don't really like to be left with the UV light, sunlight hitting it. It gets weird over time. So a lot of times if you read the instructions, it's going to say, cover it somehow. I think they're paintable. And again, they have all that stuff on the back, and you can read all that and make sure. Again, you don't want that UV rays doing damage to something that you spent time doing. So all sorts of ways to be able to seal those gaps and cracks and stuff. It also helps, like I said, keeping pests out. That's another one, So we talk about that in fall, winter maintenance as far as, air sealing and stuff. So we say air sealing, this is what we're talking about. But it helps stop those critters from wanting to move into your home when it starts to get cold. So here's another one. This is a big one here. This is a little bit hard to see, but this is what's called a rim joist. So imagine that you have, this is the outside of your house, right? And you have a board like this that goes to the outside. That's the rim board. And you have a mud sill that sits on just like this. And then you have your concrete or cinder block basement wall, say, right? So you get down your basement and you're looking, you're going to see your floor joists running like this, and they just end right into a board. What you do is this is your floor joist. That's your rim board. Wherever, the easiest way to explain it that I've learned over time is wherever two different materials touch. So you have your rim board or your rim joist or rim board, and you have, let's say, your underlayment for your flooring. You'd caulk there. Sometimes you're going to see where two of these rim boards are butted up to each other. And over time, stuff dries out and it opens up. So if you see that gap, you can get in there and caulk that. You're going to be caulking the top of that rim board. That's up against your subfloor. And the bottom of that rim board, that's up against your mud sill. You can see that caulk line here. And then your mud sill is sitting, like I said, either on top of like a poured cement wall, basement wall, or a cinder block wall. So I'm going to draw probably a very bad picture, but you get to bear with me for a minute. So I'm going to do a top view here, right? So let's say this is your cinder block wall. All right. You know, cinder blocks have some holes in them, right? And let's say you got your. So what happens when they build this? And again, this is looking straight down on it, if you're able to look straight down on it. Let's say this is your mud sill and it's sitting on top. So if you're looking at it, here's your rim board. Here's your mud sill, piece of 2x4. Here's your rim board. Here's your block wall. Usually that block wall goes out a little bit, and then you got the holes here. So, you know, you'd be caulking right in this area. Here's your floor, your subfloor. So again, you got a space right here where that air can move through. So you're caulking in this point. You got a space right here where these two materials meet. You caulk right here. And you got this space right here where it's meeting another material, or your block wall or cinder block wall. And you caulk there. So because that air wants to move underneath or in between these materials. So imagine this right here is this is your mud sill, right? You're looking down on that block wall. What you're going to notice is that there's gaps in here. And there's a lot of air that can move through those with these cinder block walls. And what they did before is they'd get like concrete or something like that, and they'd fill in this area here to kind of cover up those gaps, those gaps in the block. It fails. You know, most of these houses are, 70, 80 plus years old, and these break off. And if you were to put your hand up there, you'd feel a bunch of air moving. So what you can do with that is kind of a pain. You got to get up on a ladder or something, look down on it, shine a light. If there's loose concrete there, get it out of there. And that's where you can use, like a big gaps and cracks, and you can go in and fill these. If they're really big holes, get some old paper or whatever, crumple it up, stuff it in there, and use it as a backer before you put something like this in. If you're noticing big cracks, where I've seen it sometimes where if you're inside and you get up there and you look at it on a bright sunny day, you can actually see daylight from your basement. It may require that expanding foam instead of caulk. It might be a cheaper alternative in the long run. So like I said, there's a lot of ways to kind of think about that as far as sealing that up. Sometimes you have a cinder block wall and you may have, something blown out, a chunk of it out or whatever. Again, put your hand in front of it. You feel that air moving, get in there and seal that up however you need to be able to seal that up. So there are multiple ways to be able to do that. We're doing good on time. The other is insulating your attic. So now we're talking R value, right? So, at least you want at least like an R20, R30, R50 is usually better. So remember, the higher the R value, the more insulation you have, the longer it's going to take heat to be able to move through that insulation. Insulation doesn't stop that heat loss. It slows it down. So the more R value, the higher the R value, the more energy efficient that is. So, pop your head up in your attic, and it might be one of those things where you can have a company come out and blow in that cellulose insulation. It might be a thing where you want to roll out that fiberglass insulation. But remember that the fiberglass insulation does not stop that airflow. So a lot of people kind of go with like that blown in. Does that stop airflow completely? No, but it's like ground up newspaper. It's a little better than your fiberglass. So adding that R value in your attic is going to help that heat loss out that way. If you really want to get into it, some people get up there and actually seal it so that say around like window lights and stuff like that, you have to think of your ceiling. It's going to stay up into your attic as an exterior wall. So if you have light boxes or something along that line, let's say you're in a project where you're changing the light fixture out, just like we were talking with those outlet boxes, You can do the same thing with the boxes where your lights are. Seal around those with caulk, that sort of thing. And again, you're talking about that air movement through. So putting a better R value in your attic. If you want to, dealing with some of that air movement, that sort of thing. The thing to remember about your attics is you don't want to put insulation in that's going to interfere with air movement. And I just talk about stopping air movement. I'm talking about ventilation into the attic. Especially some of these older homes, they may need to put what are called dampers in, baffles in, so that you get fresh air coming in and coming in at the base and then expelling at the top, as far as whether it's a turtle vent or a ridge vent or something along that line. Because again, you're going to lose that heat. And if you don't have good ventilation in your attic, that moisture is going to build up and it's going to cause problems with your decking and all sorts of things. So usually with attics and that sort of thing, get a good reputable insulation company and talk to them. Make sure, say, yep, I want to put insulation in, but I don't want to mess with my ventilation. So ventilating an attic is very important. Keep that in mind if you're doing something along that line. A couple other little things you can do. So you can do, if you have, say you have a water heater, tanked water heater, and it's an older style, people say, oh, is insulating going to be good? It depends. So I found a really simple way to be able to do it is have your water heater just at normal temperature where you always have it at. Place your hand on top, not on the vent, but just on top of the water heater itself. If you can lay it there and you don't feel much in the way of heat, it may not be worth insulating necessarily. Because like I said, the newer ones have built in quite a high R value built into those tanks. So doing something like a blanket like this around it may kind of be a waste of money. But if you put your hand on top and it's hot, and I've seen ones that are, and it might be time to think about possibly wrapping that water heater. The biggest thing is that this is a R value of 6.7. The biggest thing with that is when you put it on, please read the instructions, making sure you're not getting some of this stuff near an open flame or something along that line. So I mean, they have pretty specific things they want you to do. If there are vents on the side where it needs to pull in for like combustion air or something, that needs to be left open. You usually have a spot in the front underneath, like where the gas valve is and stuff, where you can open it up and you see the big flame heating up that tank. You don't want this stuff anywhere near that. On an older tank, this is great, but you have to do it right. So read your instructions and make sure, and if you need to, call the manufacturer, ask them questions like that. So wrapping those water heaters to make it so that is not constantly trying to heat it up. Or, if you're thinking about getting a new water heater, sometimes something like a tankless water heater where you're not constantly keeping 40 plus gallons of water at whatever temperature you want it at. Tankless water heater, when you turn it on, you're calling for hot water. It heats it up right at that point. Other than that, it just sits there. So sometimes that's a nice way to be able to do it. Your mechanical systems are part of, that energy savings. We were talking about the water heater as far as that goes. Your furnace, we talk about this in furnace class. Making sure your furnace is tuned up and doing the best that it can do. It depends on its efficiency and stuff. Having good air filters and changing them. We talk about that in furnace class also. Some people want to put in, programmable thermostats, that sort of thing. Fine. There's all that sort of stuff that you can do also. Excuse me. The other is things like carbon monoxide detectors, changing your smoke detector batteries. There's a lot of things along that line. We talk about that quite a bit more in detail in home safety and security. But again, especially in the winter, you're thinking wintertime, that sort of thing. When you're possibly running other items in your home, carbon monoxide detector and smoke detectors are extremely important. Little side note on that: please don't try to heat your house up with your oven, especially if it's a gas oven. They're horrible as far as using all that gas, and they actually pump out quite a bit of carbon dioxide, and it can be a bad thing. So don't try to heat your house with your oven. Changing your light bulbs over to LEDs. So, it doesn't feel like that long ago where you're saying LEDs are great, but they're expensive. Well, that's not the case anymore. They're actually pretty inexpensive. And it's actually getting hard to find regular incandescent bulbs. So LEDs, a simple LED, I'll give you a quick example, like a 65-watt bulb uses 65 watts. The equivalent as far as how much light is given off from an LED is like 9. So you have quite a difference, and you add that up across your house, and that can add up in your energy savings. So using those LED bulbs, big thing about LED bulbs is understanding what type of fixture you're putting them in. They say rated to, operate for, 15 years or whatever, right? They have little electronics in them. And some are designed to be in an enclosed fixture, meaning, like those globe style fixtures versus something that's open. So if you're buying LEDs for the first time, that's one of the things you want to look at. And it can be kind of a pain. They've gotten better over the years, but look at that. It'll say rated for enclosed fixtures. Great. Or not rated for enclosed fixtures. And just knowing, which ones are that you can use. Because, is it going to burn your house down? No. Is it going to make that LED die quicker than it should if you're using a not rated for enclosed fixture in an enclosed fixture? Yeah. So just looking at that little bit can help. And then you get into the whole color range, Kelvin range, all that sort of stuff. I don't have enough time to go over that, but you're getting good at talking about that also. Talking about saving, money, saving water. So, low flow shower heads. Getting those switched over to that. Switching to low flow aerators. Or if you're putting in a new toilet, or you're putting in a new buying a new dishwasher or whatever that uses water, pay attention to how much water it uses. Washing machines. Sometimes changing over from a top load, that can use quite a bit of water to a front load that uses very much, very little. Yeah, they cost a little bit more, but you think about the life of the unit itself, and you're going to be saving quite a bit of water over time. Other simple things: wash your clothes in cold water. We've been doing it for years and years, and they're pretty good. So details like that, right? So there are a lot of ways to be able to save that money. Some of the other things you can do is you can get pipe wrap like this. This is for a 3/4 inch copper pipe or PEX. It doesn't really matter. And you can get some for 1/2 inch also. And you can buy this in, this is just a chunk. You can buy them in, 10-foot sticks or 4-foot sticks. And you just wrap them around your, at the very least, I don't know if you're able to see it or not. We talked about this in the other class, was where these pipes are coming up from your water heater. This is a water heater that's been wrapped. If you were to look at this again with a thermal camera, you'll notice that these are, really hot, both the hot and cold. And so some people will use this kind of a pipe wrap in that first 3 or so feet coming off that water heater. Other people will wrap all their hot lines. Fine. It means that, it's going to slow down that heat loss as far as that water sitting in there. Other people will insulate both their hot lines and cold lines because they may have condensation issues or something like that in a damp basement. So by wrapping a cold line, you're going to stop that issue. Wrapping them in using just electrical tape. Some have a tape that's built in and they'll stick. I still use some kind of electrical tape around it just to hold it. You don't want a big gap. And then, getting creative as far as working around like a 90 or something. You take a little V-notch out of it and you can bend it, tape it, and you have a nice continuous insulation. The last couple minutes. All right. So what the other big thing I'm going to talk about as far as air loss in your home are your attic hatches. So, in a lot of the older homes, these attic hatches are, like in the worst possible spot, right? They're in a closet or something like that. And they're usually just a piece of drywall or a piece of wood. And, again, if you were to look at it with the thermal imaging camera, it's amazing how much heat is drafting out of there. So what you can do, back to this sticky stuff, all different types. I mean, here's one here. There's a self-adhesive. That lid is sitting on a piece of wood usually, and usually just sits there. So popping that lid up, cleaning that, and putting some kind of a seal down where it's going to seal, that board is going to seal down, and then insulating the back of the board itself. Some people just use fiberglass. It's fine. Some people go out and do a little bit extra and maybe use glue together like that 2-inch closed cell foam that you can buy in sheets. Some people, cut them out to, a certain amount, and you can add up, get an R20 for that hatch. And it also adds a little bit of weight, which is nice because then it seals that down up to whatever type of sealant you use for that lid to sit on. So you don't want to like screw it shut necessarily. I mean, you need to be able to still access it, but there are things that you can do to be able to make it so you're not losing a ton of heat. And a lot of times people don't think about it because, again, they're stuck in a closet or something. Newer houses, they're meant to be out in the open, so where you can access them a little bit. So, if you're really into the energy efficiency stuff, you can always look up energy raters in your area, and they'll come out and they'll do what's called a blower door test. They'll put your house on negative pressure. They'll do a bunch of other things, and they'll work with you to be able to say, all right, here are your biggest culprits in your house, right? Here are your biggest air leakages, tube of caulk, some foam, you're going to be able to save quite a bit. And they can work with you as far as what is the best first step to do? What is the best second step to do? So you're not wasting your money. A lot of people think, oh, I got to change my windows out because I'm losing a ton of air out of that. That may be the case, but it may be, hey, you just need a couple tubes of caulk. So working with that energy rater, and yes, they charge you, but usually what you're going to save, is really worth it. So like I said, if you want a little more guidance on that, you can hire one of those energy raters, and they can tell you what you need to do, or at least you have a good plan if you're not wanting to do it, hiring people and saying, all right, this is what I need done first. That's what I need done second. So like I said, working with those energy raters is a nice way to be able to do that. And I'm out of time. So hopefully you learned something. Like I said, if you have a comment, leave it in there. Give us a like. All that stuff.
Thank you very much, Lee. Just a quick question. I know a lot of older homes have they have walk-up attic spaces.
Yeah.
Where they have a door.
Yep.
What can people with a walk-up attic space do?
So yeah, what Jason is saying, as far as walking up. So yeah, a lot of the old houses, you walk up the stairs. Either you have a standard door going into your attic, and usually it's an interior door, or they may have a door that you push up and it swings open like this. You can do a lot of different things. So let's say this is your door to your attic, right? And you're walking up the stairs, and it would just be usually just an old wood door. What I've seen people do is If it has weather stripping, treat it like an exterior door. That's first step. So if it has weather stripping or whatever, check that. If that door is cold, say, I've seen it where what people will do is they'll get, again, that foam sheets at Clothes sell foam sheets. Usually they have a foil face on them so that you don't have flame spread, that sort of thing. And what they'll do is they'll cut it out and they'll cut around your lock and or your latch and stuff, and they'll apply it to the back side of the door. Sometimes you have to think about what's going on this side a little bit. But I've seen them where, on the back side of the door, there's that much insulation stuck to it. And, it works. So like I said, there's things like that. If it's one of those doors that say, you flip up, you walk up and you push it up like this and it hinges up like this, you can kind of do the same thing, So you have to, sometimes you have to be creative. And again, you're talking with an energy raider, a lot of times they have little tricks and tips that they've seen over time. But you have what's called a building envelope. So it's that area that separates a living space from the outside space. And most people think, all right, exterior wall, that's my envelope. But so is your attic. Your ceiling, it goes up to your attic. The exterior door, maybe to your attic or to the outside. So, and they'll be able to explain that a lot more. So there's a lot of different ways to be able to deal with that. And hopefully that answered your question.
Yes, thank you very much. I really appreciate you taking the time tonight, Lee, to talk to us about weatherizing and trying to save some money this winter. I hope that our guests also got some good information there. If you have questions or comments, feel free to put them in the comment section, and we will try to get them answered and reply to you as soon as possible. Or you can contact us on our website. Our website is www.communityhomeworks.org. Scrolling across the bottom of your screen there. We're glad you joined us. This was a Green Living Series workshop tonight. It was made possible with a generous grant from the Kalamazoo Community Foundation's Love Where You Live Environment Fund. So we're real thankful that they were able to help us give this grant to help people conserve their resources and weatherize their homes. Thank you very much for joining us. We will have another class coming up next Tuesday at 6 o'clock. So please come join us here in the classroom or live online. Have a great evening, everyone.